All right, we're going to get our next session started. It is my great pleasure to introduce Schema, who is going to be talking to us about flaws in a commercial voting system and how that can make its way into civil elections in the US. So this is some really interesting work. We were talking about online voting earlier. Now we have an example.
Awesome, thank you, Matt. How are we doing on volume? You guys hear me? Perfect, fantastic. All right, I'm Schema. I'm super excited to be here. I've been attending DEF CON for a long time, but I'm excited to present, excited to take you on this journey of this kind of little pocket of the world that many people don't know about, including I didn't know about this. And I'm excited to bring you on that journey. So at the root, elections are about power and influence, and we elect the best to lead us and put their trust in them. And with that trust comes a lot of controls. Since there's so much potential for abuse, we have controls around the power that comes with elections. But there's an area of elections where those controls are much weaker. And this is an area that doesn't get discussed at places like this, and I want to bring it out of the shadows. And that's private elections. So private elections are elections for private organizations. So think unions, Amnesty International, Harvard University, tons and tons of organizations elect their leaders. And the way those elections work are very different than civil elections, and as we're going to see, there's some problems there. So first I want to touch on why does this matter? Why should we care about private elections? Let's imagine you're a foreign adversary, and on one side you have the option of co-opting state and local election, maybe getting a random congressman in a state that matters elected, and that's kind of interesting. On the other side, you have Harvard, these big NGOs. You can get to elect the president of Harvard University and a lot of these national and international organizations that are very influential. That second bucket has some very rich targets if you're a foreign adversary. Not only are the organizations themselves interesting as a place of influence, but private elections, I'm sorry, I hope you can hear me. Private elections are a stepping stone to major political offices. So here we have Justin Ketanji Brown Jackson. She started on the Harvard Board of Overseer. That's how she started to kind of gain influence and eventually came to be on the Supreme Court. We have people that are involved with the American Medical Association, senators now, ambassadors that got their start on these private elections. They're the stepping stone for a lot of big major positions in US society. So private elections have much less controls and scrutiny than traditional civil elections. And as we're going to see in this talk, their technical systems are highly vulnerable. Yeah. In this talk, I'm going to disclose a brand new zero-day vulnerability in a major provider of election software, private election software. The CVE number is here. This is a live CVE. There are approximately 2,000 elections that are affected. There are both civil elections, the kinds you're familiar with, and private elections. But this vendor runs many private elections, so we're going to focus on that part since it's so exploitable and such an interesting part that we don't talk a lot about. All right, well, before we go diving deeper into private elections and what they are, I want to first make the point of just how much work is involved in the traditional way of spying, in the traditional way of gaining influence in the US. Here we have this operation, this FBI Operation Ghost Story, where they caught a group of 10 Russian spies that had spent decades building their cover in the US. And because this is public information, we can kind of dig deep into just how much work was put into doing this. One of the spies is this gentleman here, Andre. He went by the name of Donald Howard Heatfield. That's a fake name. That's the name of a Canadian deceased person. So step one, you want to be a spy. You got to find some name and identity to take over. Step two, he got a degree at Harvard to get that legitimacy. So step two, you actually have to be admitted to Harvard, actually do the studying, and we're only on step two. Then he married, so he married in the US, he had children, legitimate children in the US. His children didn't know he was a spy, didn't know he was a Russian. Children believed the whole story. He bought a house out here, and then he worked his way up like everybody. He started at the bottom of a company and then kind of moved his way up and eventually got more and more influence. He spent 20 plus years doing this. This is what it takes to do things the traditional way. There's a lot of energy because there's so much opportunity here to have tentacles everywhere in the US. Foreign adversaries spend a lot of time doing this. So if you wanted to become a spy in the US, there's that kind of path A, the traditional path, the laundry list of things, the decades you need to put in to get in that position. But if you wanted to take the shortcut, just become an elected official. Become an elected official of a private organization. Go straight to the top. Yeah, I'm sorry. It is funny. So if you were to take that path B, here's the menu of organizations that you could put your people in and top leadership positions. You have unions, big major unions, auto workers unions, all sorts of industries. NGOs, we talked about those, universities, all the major universities elect their leadership, corporation, professional bodies, the associations that govern who gets to be a doctor, who gets to be a lawyer. You could put your people in those positions. Pension funds, billions of dollars that get spent. You could have your people deciding where that money goes. This is attractive. I want this. I'm interested. And I'm sure a foreign adversary is too. So now that we've established that these elections are influential and juicy targets for a foreign adversary, I want to make a second point, which is that these elections are a lot easier to attack than traditional civil elections. The big reason is polling. Traditional elections have a lot of polling, third-party polling leading up to the elections. By the day the election comes, we already kind of know who's going to win. And there's a lot of visibility and focus on that. And if things don't line up with the polls, people are going to notice. There's a lot of scrutiny. There's no polling in private elections. These are a lot more open. And these elections are all electronic, no paper record. I mean, I think the crowd knows how dangerous all electronic elections are. And here we have it. We have just this explosive mix of very powerful positions, no way to reconcile whether those numbers make any sense with third-party polling, and all electronic elections. To me, that's pretty scary. If you're like me, you'd never heard about private elections before this. I definitely haven't. And it's kind of the boring areas like this that foreign adversaries actually tend to attack, rather than the very visible things. So far we've been discussing a theoretical vulnerability in election software. I want to get to the practical now. In this part of the talk, I'm going to disclose a zero-day vulnerability in one of the big major providers of private election software. I mentioned earlier there are about 2,000 elections affected. It's a live CVE. And to tell you the story about this, I want to tell you about my journey, about how I discovered this. I voted in one of these private elections, and I realized that there's basically this one vendor that handles all these private elections you've never heard about, but are very important and influential. And this is what the process looks like. You just go to some website. This is an election for the State Bar of Texas. It's a public URL. You just go to this special web page, and then you put in your information here, you click submit, and you vote. And that's it. That's the whole part. That's the whole story. I voted in one of these elections. My university has their alumni vote on the leadership of the organization. So I went to a page very similar to this, put in my information, and I made a typo in the information I put in. And I got to this error page. Now the error page isn't so interesting, but the part that is interesting is the URL. And I want to tell you about that. So if we focus on that for a second, this is what that URL looks like. And there's two parameters, but there's this one parameter here that just has a bunch of numbers. Doesn't seem so interesting, but I, maybe being a little too curious a person, I'm sure this audience can relate. If you start playing around with these parameters and start putting code in that parameter, rather than the normal numbers the system expects, if you start putting code in that, in this case, if we put an instruction to wait for 30 seconds, the software actually executes that instruction. crazy. I mean, we just put something, a random thing in the URL, and we got the software to actually run that code. Now, getting the software to wait 30 seconds is pretty innocuous, but I, as a security researcher, know how serious a thing that is. This is called an SQL injection. And what it means is that, in a traditional way a system works, there's the database that has all the important information about the system, about who voted and how they voted and so on. And then there's software that's a gatekeeper of that. So that if a regular user tries to ask information they're not entitled to, like how did the X person vote, the gatekeeper makes sure that they're not given that information. And an SQL injection is really problematic because it allows us to bypass this gatekeeper, to ask the database directly, how did Alice vote? Oh, how about we change this particular vote? Or how about we add new votes to this database? And nobody would know because there's no paper backups. It's all electronic, these elections. So to recap, with this SQL injection vulnerability, just to visit, sorry, I'll get out of the way. Just by visiting this one public URL and kind of messing with the parameters a little bit, we're able to do anything to the database, to view how people voted, to submit fake votes, and then to overwrite existing votes, to change how existing people voted. This is a very serious thing, all through that kind of URL parameter and putting special things in there. There's even a little bonus. There's a number 4 on this. The database is misconfigured in a way that allows an attacker to escape the confines of the database and take full control of the server. So an attacker in this situation can, even kick out the legitimate owners of the server and disable their user accounts, can install software, they can install a backdoor. A backdoor means that even if the actual vulnerability, the URL messing around stuff we've seen earlier, even if the vendor fixes that, if somebody has managed to install a backdoor, an attacker can continue to get in until the backdoor itself is fixed. So they really have total control of this machine. So we were talking about the impact earlier. There's about 2,200 elections affecting, started from 2001. So anybody can see how those elections, or an attacker could see how voters have voted in those elections. Lots of organizations you'd recognize: Teamsters, IBEW, Amnesty International, lots of universities, Yale University example, California State Bar, public pension systems in most of the states out there, and many, many more organizations like this. So in this section of the presentation, I want to talk a bit about the process of discovering and reporting this vulnerability. It's a very concerning thing. It's a very shocking thing to discover. And when you discover something like this, it's difficult to approach the vendor directly. Like, who am I to reach out to the vendor and say, hey, everything is broken here? Will they even believe me? Will they trust me? Will I be even able to reach out to the right person to get a hold of them and get them to pay attention? In this case, I had the assistance of CISA. CISA is a department of, an agency part of the Department of Homeland Security, and they do exactly this. And I want to bring them up to, if anybody in this audience is thinking about exploring election vulnerabilities, private or otherwise, they're a fantastic player. They do exactly this. They help researchers like I am disclose vulnerabilities to the vendor. And they're the government, and the vendor pays attention when the Department of Homeland Security is knocking, saying, hey, there's something wrong with your software. And in this case, they very much did, thanks to CISA's help. If you're ever considering doing a vulnerability disclosure, I couldn't say enough good things about them. Very technically savvy team, very competent, they're amazing to work with. This is the URL, you put your report there, and they'll be in touch to help remediate it. And since we're talking about remediation, I want to give you an update on how things stand with this particular private election vendor that's responsible for a lot of private elections. They have taken steps to remediate the vulnerability we just talked about, including by hardening their web application firewall. But one thing they haven't yet done, and I want to highlight, is we don't know if people have exploited this vulnerability. It's certainly there's certainly the potential there, but we don't know if it's happened. And the only people that really have a chance to know is the vendor. So the vendor has yet to commit to do a forensic audit of their logs to see if there's ever been an attack, if they have evidence of an attack. They haven't committed yet to publicly disclose if they do or don't find something, and that's still something that's up in the air. And that's it. I wanted to introduce you to the world of private election software. I'll take some questions from here, but to me this was a fascinating and intriguing little part of the world. Thank you. Awesome.
Isn't there some,
Oh yeah.
you can hear, I don't think.
I can hear. I'll repeat your question. Yeah.
There's some federal bills going through in regards to requiring disclosure after a breach. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and where you think it's at. You can just repeat. 'Cause
Sure.
You'll say it better than me.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is around pending legislation that will require organizations to disclose vulnerabilities like this.
Or when they've been breached and what was grabbed.
Yeah, when they've been breached and what was grabbed. I don't know the exact details, but it's my understanding that the legislation that's most likely to pass only affects public companies, of which this organization is not. There's a lot of these random one-off vendors. This is a very small organization. They're probably like a 10, 15 person company. And I don't know if you're familiar with that XKCD comic where there's like a whole pile of things that are built up, and then there's that one little node at the bottom that everything depends on. It's very much like this. So I don't know if that legislation would affect them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're exempt from it, because they're just such a tiny player, but so many of us depend on them doing their job right and paying attention and kind of having scrutiny on that. So I don't know if it affects them directly.
I didn't know if you knew, because it's important legislation. People don't know that when organizations get breached, they're not required to tell you they've been breached. All of a sudden your stuff is on the dark web.
That's right, yeah. Today, the comment here was that many organizations are not required to disclose a breach when it happens, and suddenly you just find your information on the dark web, and you might not even know which organization is responsible for it, right? That is very much the status quo. We do need to get that fixed, for sure.
We'll talk more about the legislation.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for the work that you've done.
Thank you.
You're why I'm here. You're a hero. This is amazing, right?
Thank you.
I looked up the CVE. I've noticed that it's not disclosed yet. Thank you for doing responsible disclosure. My question is, has the vendor been giant jerks about this, or have they been like, oh, wow, thank you, we can fix this, given a timeline, etc.?
Yeah, the question was, how has the vendor responded to this? And the response, I think, has been quite effective in big part because CISA is involved. So I want to emphasize again, if you're thinking of doing this, involve an organization like CISA. They're fantastic. They've been taking steps at remediating the vulnerabilities we talked about here, but a lot of their systems are just very old. They run on this very old database called Sybase. And it's missing a lot of the security features we expect in modern databases, but they're just stuck with it. They built this thing decades ago and it's working, at least working, but still has security problems, right? So they're in this tough spot where they're trying to fight their demons and their tech debt that they have and make the best out of that. So my impression is that they're earnestly trying, but also the tech stack is in a difficult position for them to quickly remediate everything completely. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so since we can't read up on this CVE yet, or what company, you're not wanting to tell us what company that is.
That's right. I'd rather not disclose the company, since I want to give them a chance to do as many steps as they can fully resolving the vulnerability. They've done a lot, but there's still some stuff on their plate, and I want to give them a chance.
The election community might want to know.
Absolutely. I will publish a paper with the full details, including naming the vendor. You can, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if anyone else has their hand up. So, have you recommended to them or they recommended to their customers mitigating controls? So, simply put it behind a WAF, right? That would help quite a bit.
Yep.
Attempts for SQL injection.
Yeah, so I think there's two questions here. Has a vendor alerted their customers here, and have they put it behind a WAF? Is that capturing the questions? Yeah. So let me start with the second one. They have put it behind a WAF. That's been pretty effective, but there's still stuff to do. On the first question, they're planning a public announcement. I haven't seen it live yet. They know that this talk is happening. I don't think the customers have been made aware yet, but they are planning to make them aware. And there's also a CISA alert that's going out Monday covering this. So, yeah.
In today's times, I don't know. It seems to me, I personally, do you find it embarrassing that companies are still having basic SQL injection vulnerabilities?
The question is, do I find it embarrassing that companies still have SQL injection vulnerabilities? Yes, absolutely. It is. This is nuts. This is crazy. You go to a website and you type stuff in the URL and you have access to the database. This is insanity. And we've known about these failures for a very, very long time. But it kind of goes back to this concept I was saying earlier. You know, there's just these random vendors you've never heard about in some nook of the world that so many critical things depend on, and they've been operating this business for decades and it works, and they're not necessarily growing their business. They've sort of captured all the business there is to grow. They don't really have incentive to tear it down and make it better. It's just, it's working. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of things like this, especially in critical infrastructure. So it is an embarrassment, but I also don't see it going away very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for the talk. It was
Sure.
really cool. So now that you've found this vulnerability in one of the, as you said, many vendors, have you considering doing it systematically for all the other online vendors, just to see if this maybe is more widespread than just this one?
I definitely have. There is one vendor that has a formal bug bounty program, and their system is gets a lot more attention from security researchers because there's a bit of money there. So there's definitely opportunity to research this. I haven't gone as deep as I wanted to because this has been so all-consuming, and especially helping the vendor get to the finish line, and remediation has been most of what I've been focused on. Yeah. I think we're good then. Yeah. Thank you very much.